This is the moment you've been waiting for. 60 minutes of Adrian Accidental Community Managers Bar. Hey, Adrian, how's it going?
We'll talk about overmodulation. I think you might have busted a speaker or something somewhere. I mean, we were talking before about my brief radio career, and so it's just you broke all the rules there, buddy. But hey, thank you for bringing the energy.
Yeah, so then I break the speakers, the mics, and then it's like all over. It's like great.
Well, we'll give you a couple of moments before your neighbor starts knocking on the door and asking if you're okay.
No, luckily being at a house, I'm sure like when I was in apartments doing shows, people are like, anytime people saw you, like, what does that guy do?
Yeah, I mean that's the benefit of home ownership. I mean, we have to deal with all the other things like property tax and nosy neighbors, but pretty much what you do in your private dwelling is kind of what you end up doing, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I only worry about like the quiet hours. If I have like a super user program or chapter meetups, and then there's like Australia or these other parts of the country where you got to have energy at like 2 a.m. when you're just like dying, and then you're like screaming and doing stuff, and your neighbors are like, "What? Why are they having a party at 2 a.m.?" It's like, no, it's my like meetup or super user program.
Well, I mean, for me, I like to crank up the tunes before I do any of this stuff live, so it could get loud. So that's the benefit of being in the house. My wife knows because she'll hear the loud music and then it just goes silent, and she goes, "Okay, he must be going live now."
Yeah, it's like I didn't have time for the hype song, things like that. And we'll see Lori Goldman out there. Hey, Lori runs the CMX out of Colorado. So I know Lori's a big fan of yours and your book, so that's awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've been very thankful. Lori said some very nice things about me out there, and I really appreciate it. Well, I appreciate everyone, and I appreciate you having me on here. I mean, we got to meet in person in Vegas briefly. That was a lot of fun, because I've been watching the show for a while. I've known you a long time as well, so it was kind of nice to put the person in person with the personality.
Yeah, it's like amazing. So Adrian has his book out, Accidental Community Manager. It's holiday times, perfect stocking stuff for in-laws, kids, everybody in your family, everybody you know. Just give them this book. Even for like kids coming up, this is an amazing career for people and things like that. So definitely check it out. And almost like what was interesting too is like a B2B, right? Because B2B to me and is like the most challenging. And so that's like kind of coming up and doing different communities and stuff. It was like I gravitated to B2B because it was so much more challenging, more technical and savvy audiences. And it was such a tougher hill to climb. What was your kind of like experience like in your like kind of early days where like getting to dabble, right? Before you kind of figured out the types of like communities you liked and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of strange because prior to me getting paid professionally to manage communities, all my communities up to then had been really C2C communities, like hobby communities. Some I still run today, like one of mine is a stamp community, for example, that I run for Canadian stamp collectors, which I'm very passionate about and I enjoy. But the thing that I love about the B2B is that you're actually, I mean, not that you're not having an impact with B2C or C2C, but the fact is it's a bit of a tangible aspect that it's kind of strange. Like you'll say to someone, "Oh yeah, like I work with the folks at Qualtrics. I work with the folks at Expensify." Like, "Oh, every business person uses Expensify." And that's really cool that you get to work with those folks there, and they're doing great work. And I've always just kind of just enjoyed that aspect of it. It's kind of naturally how I fell into it. I came from a long line of marketing and product and kind of just fell into it in that way. Hence the title, the Accidental Community Manager. And I kind of the stake I kind of put in the ground was like I had been doing communities since the early internet, but it was really until like my paycheck was directly tied to that work that it was like, okay, now I'm I kind of felt like I was wearing that coat, so to speak. Not to say that people doing community for free or on the side as a hobby, you're not a community manager, but that's just how I defined it for myself. Hey, you could actually make money doing this, which was a revelation.
I know. And it's like, speaking of that, it's like, I was just thinking, like, back when I started way back in the day, I was like, this is like the perfect, this would have been like the perfect book. And it's like the sanity check, the conversational style, just these little points. You're like, here's what I'm thinking of doing for this. And then you go read like what you wrote. What did Adrian say? You're like, okay. He's like, even though we've never like talked about something, you're like, your thought process is like the same. And it was like, that was like, so amazing because it's almost like you're learning, but there's like, what is it, like reaffirming affirmation,
Yeah.
or I don't know, words escape me at 8 a.m., but yes.
Well, I think the thing is for me, I think you and I've had a similar journey into this space, starting a long time ago. And when I started writing the book, and I think I even talk about it in the book, it's like I wanted this book to be time traveler could go back in time and put this on my desk, and it'd be like, oh, this is the book that I need. Now, um, the reality is, and I always feel like I'm talking like a dinosaur when I point it out, but those of us that are older or listening to this can understand there were books about community out at that time, but the challenge was it's this thing called the internet wasn't to the extent that it is now. And so there's hat tips I need to give to certain folks that wrote a lot of really great books, someone like Amy Jo Kim who wrote something in the year 2000. But the reality was where I was in my little neck of the woods up in Canada, in Montreal, that book, I wasn't even aware of it. It wasn't really something at the library. I wasn't connected with anyone in any way. The internet was basically just beginning. There wasn't really a way to find that kind of stuff. And if you were trying to search, you would get some pretty, garbage results in that sense. I mean, I think Amazon started in 96. If you think about it, I don't even think they were shipping to Canada at the time. So it was like um, the local bookstore, which was W.H. Smith at the mall. If it didn't carry it, it didn't exist as a book. So, or you go to the library, but I mean, no library was carrying books about community. I mean, they had books about, I was still using the Encyclopedia Britannica, I mean, that's to kind of put it into context. And I guess to really age me, I remember Encarta was like the big, like, woo, a multimedia encyclopedia. Like that was like the big, and I remember even on the front of it, and I think it was 98 or 99 had like now includes even more video clips. That was like the big, like the big deal that you have you don't need these 85 volumes of Encyclopedia Britannica. You have this nice little CD that contains the world's knowledge on 2 discs, and if you went past the letter L, you had to change discs to get the information, right? And then you had to like save almost half your computer was with that. So, that's kind of where I started with the idea for the book to be, this kind of piece that would scan soup to nuts everything. But also, I wanted, as you said, I wanted to be approachable because the thing is, I'll be honest, like I do like to read, but the things I end up reading are, we could say garbage. I mean, not in a rude way, but I like to read like mysteries and histories and like Malcolm Gladwell, for example. Not that I'm saying Malcolm Gladwell is garbage, but that's kind of the style that I really appreciate because I don't find his books are dense. I feel it's very conversational. It's very approachable. I find the books are very easy to read. I really appreciate the way that Malcolm lays things out. And you feel like you get to know him just because he'll insert a story about how he loves to run. Like I think anyone that has read anything or heard anything about him knows that he loves to run, that he loves basketball, and various other things. And, so for me, that's always an intriguing aspect and kind of what I want to bring into this book as I was writing it, to make it one of those things you could kind of just sit down and read and not feel like you need a PhD or need to go to the library and look up resources or be so over the head that you're like, I don't understand these concepts. I wanted to keep it as simple as possible and then realize that other people will buy other books, which, has borne out. Because if you go on Amazon, I see that this book is being bought with other books that in my mind is the appropriate kind of way to go about it.
Yeah, and one of the kind of great thing there is like kind of when you get some books, but you can't tell, did the author ever spend, not just with community, but did the author ever spend like time in the trenches, like on the front lines, like experiencing this. And when you read your book, here's somebody, this is like community from the trenches, right? If you've been a community manager for 3 months, 6 months, you've encountered or had to think about some of these things or had to try to implement some of these things. And this is like real world stuff, right? If you're going to call up a friend or hop on things, you're giving like an account of real world things that every community manager does across all these like spectrum of stages, even personal health. And I think that's what's so invaluable. There's a lot of books on strategy, and it's like so high level. It's like you're almost trying to like make sense of like a James Webb photograph sometime. How do I like take these high
Yeah.
concepts, and would that even work? And then others are just like tactic heavy. And then it's like, then you're like, well, crap, you can't just copy and paste the tactic that worked for someone else. But yours is just kind of like one of the best of just this real world
Thank
community
you.
conversational from the trenches. And it's just great that somebody's kind of like almost like a documentary film. It's like so great that somebody has like just chronicled that, because I don't know if I've seen such a like a complete kind of J.R.R. Tolkien kind of like just story. Like it's amazing.
I appreciate that. I mean, for me, like what I always found annoying was I remember like there was this, it was almost comical. I was in a speech once, and it was almost comical in the sense that this leader at this company was saying, "I've solved our problems on how we're going to get through this tough time. We're going to increase sales. So what we have to do is we have to increase sales. I want the salespeople to work on increasing sales, and if we increase sales, that will solve all our problems." And he kind of went on for like an hour, and at the end, it was kind of like, well, how do we do that? There wasn't a roadmap. There wasn't any thought about how we're going to do it. It was just kind of, and it was a weird motivate. It wasn't really motivational. It ended up being demotivational, because as people were like kind of walking out of the meeting, it was kind of like, well, okay, well, what do we do here? It's, by the way, it's not, I don't want to say which company it was, but it's not the current company I work for. Um, but I'm just saying, like, that I was trying to avoid that, so that when people read the book, that there was things that they could take and use. And I should also mention, for those that are listening, it does say B2B community, but I've talked to a lot of folks that are using that are nonprofit or B2C or C2C, or there's nuggets for everyone in here. The reason that I specifically called out B2B was to keep myself focused on that, so I didn't kind of delve off into other areas. But also, more importantly, it's where the majority of my experience has been, and I wanted to stay honest and true to that. And thirdly, it was also just to protect myself, in the sense that there are certain experiences in B2C that you have to be aware of that are different. And I've actually talked about this on LinkedIn about the differences. But I mean, essentially, the main difference ends up being about a passion level. There's just a difference in passion level, and that in turn may change the way that you approach certain things. For example, a lot of B2B communities don't have to worry about the weekends. B2C communities, or C2C communities, never sleep. I mean, they never sleep. People are extremely passionate. You may have to take self-protection measures, which is unfortunate but true. That being putting your full persona name out there is maybe a bit more dangerous, depending on your who you are, be it female or a person of color, just because you may have to deal with um, unfortunately, some people can go crazy and stalk you or do other things of that nature. Like, I remember I had a colleague of mine had a gaming community, and it would be a regular occurrence where someone was threatening suicide on a regular basis. And which to me, when the first time I heard that, I was like, oh my God. But he was, not that he was cavalier about it, but he's like, this happens so often that we already have like a process and we know what to do. And I mean, my whole career, I've never had any, I mean, the worst that'll ever happen is maybe someone's doing promotional stuff in the community, or they'll share like some PII that they probably shouldn't have, like their credit card information, or maybe you get someone who's upset or goes on a bit of a rant, but nothing that we had to call police about. Like, I've been involved with communities that had to like involve state and federal regulators about content that was posted that was inappropriate, and like that you don't deal as much with in B2B communities. But if I had written this as a more general book, I would have talked about those aspects, because that's stuff that you have to be aware of, that you may have to deal with in those communities. So I just wanted to point out that there is stuff in there for people that are dealing with other communities, but I didn't go in depth in maybe some of the other areas that differ. So you may want to look at some other books that could fill in those things, because those things do arrive.
Yeah, they kind of got their virtues, strengths, and things like that. And I even remember like in the 2000s when I'd meet like community managers that were in gaming. It's like, what's your challenges, things like that, and then say it, and they're like, oh, what's challenging you? It's like, man, I just wish I'd stopped getting doxxed. And you're like, doxxed? What is that, right? Where that someone basically has that community rage. I forget what you call it in the book, right? Freaks out, but it was very common, like in gaming communities, for them to dox people, where they made up a threat and then the
Yeah,
police show up and they're like, it is
yeah,
like got to be
swatting.
like the scariest freaking thing to do, because there's no like rhyme reason, right, for what might set somebody off in a gaming community. And just being woken up at some random hour, right, it's like, holy crap, that's like life and death right there. So I was like, I'm never going to get hired into a gaming community after that. It's like, I am good.
Yeah, I mean, I feel there's a lot of similarities between that and crypto communities. Anyone that's involved in crypto, when you deal with finance, it's very emotional. And I've noticed a very similar style of individuals in the Web3 aspect, that they get very, there's a lot of passion there, which is both good and bad. It makes it easy to build a community, but when things don't go their way, so if you're in that space, you may want to consider, and I talk about that, you can create a persona of yourself that still allows you to have some personality, but not necessarily putting your last name or your full picture and yourself at risk. And that's just the challenge of the different types of communities that people need to consider sometimes.
And I think another like important point there, which is kind of like that sometimes you will get like what we say bad actors or bad apples in your community that just kind of like they could be like a power user, but their negatives outweigh their bad. And so sometimes like, I just really like, if it's a support community, I really love that they help out all these other people. So I'm kind of just putting up with them just being so hostile and overly aggressive. And it's like you have to kind of have that line in the sand. It's like at the dog park today, I'm walking my dogs along the trail, but in the big dog park, somebody's dog keeps like attacking other dogs. And you're like, sorry, it's not usually like that. And finally, this one person like steps up. It's like, hey, maybe you should leave. And they're like, you don't own this place. And they're like, no. We think you and your dog should leave, right? And then everybody, all these other pet owners are like, yes, please leave. Where you kind of just see like the community kind of just come together. And so for that sanity check, I guess from your perspective, is kind of like thoughts on these kind of like people that are going against the community guidelines, and when is enough, and then just for community managers to know like it is okay to like remove people. You don't have to put up with that stuff, and it can be very, very detrimental to your community self, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced it, sadly, more times than I'd care to. But usually, what I like to do is have a conversation with the individual and try to understand where they're coming from and explain the scenario. Because I mean, sometimes that works. Just saying, hey, the way you're coming across as a bit of a dick, or the things you're doing. Like, can we modify the tone? Like, we appreciate the things that you're doing, and that kind of thing. But sometimes you don't have a choice. And I've certainly run into this, especially with newer community managers. They'll ask about things like, hey, do you have shadow ban and mark as a troll and things of that nature, because they don't want to actually deal with it. And I kind of, at the end of the day, I say, look, the word manager is in the title, community manager, so you have to manage. And sadly, sometimes that means that you have to ask people to leave. Like, it's for the the one-off troll and doing that, that's, I guess, the shadow ban's fine. But I much just prefer to be like, look, you're basically, you've broken our societal rules or guidelines. Here's what you broke, and if you continue to do so, we're going to have no choice but to ask you to leave. Every community is different. Like, I had one in one of my communities. He's a really good member in sense of the content that he puts out is fantastic. Like, people love his content. But people were complaining to me about his behavior because he was just getting into arguments. And I had the chance to actually meet him in person, had a good conversation. And, he sometimes he'll slip up, and I've talked to him about it, and I gave him like a timeout and, kind of went through it again. And now it's actually really good. And we're back on track. And it was worth the effort to put in to kind of work with him on that. I think it was also just good for his career to have a little bit more self-awareness, and but he was open to the criticism at least. Sometimes you just have an asshole though, and you just have to kick him out. Like that's just the reality of it. It gets a bit tougher though in B2B communities when they're paying you money, and in that scenario. But hopefully, that also makes it a bit easier from the point of view that you have people that you can talk to at a company and say, look, this is the reason why we're like, that's why documentation and keeping records is so important, to be like, do you find that this was, what's the word I'm looking for? Appropriate in a community for your business? This is a person representing your brand, and this is the way that they're behaving. And this is the reason why we've had to, bounce them from the community. But usually I like to start with warnings a bit more, because generally, and I said, the people that I've kicked out or had issues with generally haven't been in the B2B communities. For the most part, those have been in the B2C. Most people B2B, they usually, if you call them out, they realize like, oh shit, this is related to my work, and this is, my professional identity that's at risk here. So maybe I'll tone it down. Or sometimes people explode, right? Like they'll be upset, maybe a feature change in a product, and they get upset. But you can, if you're doing it right, you could say, look, hey, I understand that you're really upset, and maybe, take a moment to cool down, and let's talk about it and understand a bit more. Usually that works for the most part, but at the end of the day, yeah, that's manager aspect of it. You have to manage it. You can't ignore it. Sadly, it's it's everyone's looking to you to do it. And I'll be honest, there's it's kind of the thing you have to go through the fire to learn how to do.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's just like trying to get it, be as direct and get it done before it reached DEF CON 4. And so you kind of just have to call the situation. If I kick the can for another day, and it's weird, you see it like in the communities, just the emotional damage that it can cause on other people. And once they experience emotional damage from other members, it's so tough. So many of them will just be okay. I love everything else, but this is, I'm
Yeah,
out. Right.
it's a case by case basis, and it's also
Yeah.
dependent on the community and the way that it goes about. Because like everyone can have a bad day and
Yeah.
say something that's rude. If they're normally normal and like it was a one off, like a warning should be good enough, or a removal. But if it's a consistently, like we had some that was consistently bad, I remember in one of our communities, and we just had to basically say, look, you're just not welcome here anymore. It's just, you're actually a detriment to us. And that's where you have to make that decision of where it makes sense. But a lot of that all just came from personal experience, right? Like it's, you kind of have to just go through it, sadly. And
yeah, and I think it's like, to that point, it's like, the situational awareness of like, not everyone's like can be like different. And with the pandemic, right, like mental anxiety, because you're going through so much other stress. You may be working from home, which is its own stress if you're not used to it. And so when you're encountering people, you just don't know what's going on in their day. So you have to kind of just give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Or just a little bit more patience of the times that we're in. People can be um, not normally like aggressive or coming across mean, but you just don't always know what's going on their day. But just kind of, and just, sometimes, like you said, there's like checking in on them, like just, hey, just make sure everything's okay, things like that. But it's like just kind of being like proactive in the different ways. But and then kind of let's switching gears. I was kind of curious, like it's like in my early days when I started my first community, the biggest challenge was we had no like forgot password feature, right? And so like when I started, we had all these like notebooks, just binders and binders, where the only way people could get the password at the time to get into the community was calling. But there's like no support center. No one even thought like for support, things like that. So I was like, oh my God, this is like, I'm seeing like the next 20 years of just like going through binders to give people a password. Like there wasn't even like a thing then. And so I was like, I wonder, like when Adrian was starting out, like what was his like early challenges that he, like the big challenges that he encountered as a community manager, and how did he kind of like work around them?
well, I actually talk about one of them in the book. We bought a software that had no spam features. zero spam features. They didn't even have flood control. And so as I relay in the book, we launched a community on a Friday. And I came back to the office on a Monday with an inbox full of angry individuals who had been spammed over the weekend, and um, the vendor that we had chosen, because we didn't do as good due diligence as we probably should have, didn't have any spam features, but was willing to build them for us for several thousands of dollars. And I think that also gets to just um, one of these things about that I always find interesting. I appreciate that people out there are trying to reinvent the community forum, and they want to build their own from scratch. And there's a new entrant almost every week. But the reality is, I mean, there's a lot of these platforms. Like if I look at Vanilla, I mean, it started uh, as someone's idea in their head in 2005. you know, um, and I started using it around 2006, 2007. And we're 18, 19 years later. I mean, they've solved for pretty much any issue. Not every issue, but I mean, things have been thought about, right? Like we faced high volume, low volume of traffic, spammers, scammers, phishing, moderation, merging topics, all those little things that if you go to like a new platform, they haven't thought about all that stuff. They don't, they're kind of having to rediscover all those problems. And even even some of the ones that are brand new that are out, they're having some unique ways of approaching it. But it's just it's one of those things I just find interesting, that I don't think everyone always takes to an account when they're buying a software, especially for a brand. Like, you don't want to mess with that. And that was a mistake we made early on in my career. Like, we chose a platform based on who they also had on their roster of customer, and less about what was for our needs. And it kind of came to bite us in the ass, because they shuttered themselves pretty soon after we bought the software. And if we would have done a bit more due diligence, probably would have avoided that scenario.
Yeah, and like one of the things I love, kind of like with vanilla, is just like that reliability. There's like new flashy stuff comes up, but when you've been around for a while, you see these companies that are like, oh, that's flashy, but will it be here in 6 months, 2 years, right? And so something like that, you've got like the peace of mind of like the longevity, right? That this is something you can rely on, which is just that peace of mind is priceless. Secondly, the institutional IP knowledge, right? That you're going to get from those people. They're like, have been through the trenches and the wars and the wins. So you get to like kind of rub elbows and have those people there to kind of help guide you, which is like for a lot of companies, sales enablement, go have fun. Here's a 2-page getting started guide for building a successful community. Good luck with that, buddy.
Well, I find what I find most funny is, and I get it. I mean, like a
Mhm.
huge company that has a ton of developers say, "Hey, we can roll our own." Yeah, you can roll your own, but what always happens, and I've seen this so many times over the last decade, they'll launch, and it'll be good for several months, and then Chrome or Apple or Mozilla will change something in the way that the browser functions, and it'll break the community. And the developer that's on the community is like, well, put a ticket in and we'll get to it. And it's not a priority for them. And maybe even the person that wrote the software isn't even there anymore, or so the community kind of suffers as just another thing. Now, I can tell you, like, if something happens for any of the major vendors, regardless if you're using Higher Logic or not, if there's a major change that happens at Chrome or Mozilla or iOS, like, we know right away, because it's an impact across multiple customers. That change will go in as soon as possible. Like, all things stop. And that's what I always find funny. Like, eventually what ends up happening is these homegrown communities, at some point, they come on knocking on the door saying, yeah, it's time for us to move off. And depending on how well it was constructed, because sometimes it's not well constructed, right? They just kind of like, oh, well, we're just, we don't have to worry about exporting it later. Or so there's a lot of little features that were kind of homegrown or kind of made in, and it just becomes a mess to bring over. Although we've done a ton of migrations for people on homegrown solutions, I always get queasy when someone says, "Oh, we'll just roll our own." It's like, yeah, I mean, unless you're like fully committed to the lifetime of it, it's tough, right? Like, I don't think people really pay as much attention to that. Like, it's to me, it's like the equivalent of the Fortune 500 website and the brand and the care that's taken. Most companies today are not building from scratch their website. They're using some form of CMS of some kind, high end, either like Adobe's or whatever, right? Like it's Experience Manager, and they're building these like crazy sites. Some are using a WordPress, so there's some way that people can get in and do it. But then for some reason with community, it's like, oh, let's get this cheap, low cost, fly by night startup with 2 people, and yeah, it'll be great. And it's like, it's your front door for your customers and your prospects to get to know about you. And you're going to spend millions of dollars on your website, and you're going to hire like someone out of high school, as an intern for the summer to manage your community, and you're going to buy the cheapest software possible and just hope it works. Like I just never understand that. Like,
we know how that story ends.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, and it's funny too, because you think people would have learned from social media, because if you recall, and I think a lot of people here listening will remember this. I mean, there was a time where interns were, running social media accounts. Like a major brand won't do that now, right? There's like a concern. Oh my God, like this is going on social. Like this needs to be approved. There needs to be a vetting process. Even if we don't necessarily see it, there's not the same seamlessness as you would think, that some person just sitting out there tweeting at these major accounts without some review. But for whatever reason with community, they're kind of, not saying all companies do that. I'm just saying the most successful companies have a proper dedicated team, and there's a process, and they're hiring senior individuals. But I've seen, some companies that are just kind of fly by night. I know I don't want to talk ill of the dead, because some of these companies are now bankrupt, but they do like copy and paste kind of a community, and it never ends well.
Yeah, it's like the same story. It's like there's a homegrown kind of solution. There's one person that did all the development work, and it gets better. They've left the company. Even better, there's no documentation. Even better, no one can figure out their code, but the new person wants to come in and rewrite everything. And then they start to do it, and then they leave. So it's like we pretty much always know how like that story ends. And one other topic that I really want to get, one thing that I love, like in B2B, is like the online support, like modeled communities and things like that. But like one of the things that, and since you kind of have the same passion, one of the things that like really drives me crazy is just like, is there's so many of them now, right? For it's like we've got this B2B online support community. And for support, what we've done is we've hired a community manager, AKA moderator. Their job is every time somebody posts a new question, they say, "Hey, thanks so much, Adrian. Someone will look into that and be right with you." And then you start going thread by thread, and you see the same exact response. And guess what? No one, there's no thread. You can't find a single thread where anyone ever came back in and had done that. And then you're talking to other, like some of the managers and moderators that are doing this type of thing. They're like, "What? There's a better way? Like, isn't this how, like, no, this is not how, like, all guys support communities."
I'll call them out because, and I think they're gone now as a company. Sears is gone, right? I don't know if it's gone in the States. But I mean, so Sears had this community. They spent, like, I know for a fact, several $1 million. And every post in that community was exactly what you're saying. Like someone was asking a question about their dishwasher or home roof or vacuum cleaners, and every response was, "Thank you for your response this year. Someone will get back to you." And and the thing that drove me crazy is they had this community button, and you would click it, and at the top was their Facebook group, their Twitter, and at the bottom hidden was their community, which I know, like I said, they spent over 6 figures on. And I really believe, and I don't know if I wish I had access to their numbers, but I would believe that part of the reason they went bankrupt is because they didn't execute on community properly. Because they had an opportunity when people were buying stuff from Sears to build and gather their passionate customers into a space where they could talk about the purchases that they were making. Like, think about it, like, Sears roofing and all the appliances. Like, if they had created a space where people can come talk about the various models and get help and support, and instead of wasting time on an 1-800 number or ticketing, and put that energy into the into the forum for people answering in a way, I think that, I mean, maybe Sears still would have gone bankrupt, but I think it probably would have helped them stay along a bit longer. Um, I just, it just amazes me how many. I mean, and you still see it as well. And I think I think MLB is really bad about this. Like if you go on Twitter, like anytime you tweet at MLB .tv, it'll say like, send us a direct message. You send them a direct message. It says, hey, thank you for your question. It's just an automated. It's not human in any way. I mean, at the same time, I understand where it's coming from, because it's basically bastardized the thought that, the research has shown us that the most important thing is that people feel heard, and that that there's some kind of a response. But the problem is, and I'm sure that there's research out there, and if not, I mean, I think common sense tells us is that it's actually probably better for them not to say anything than to have that automated message, because it's so disingenuous that that no one's actually heard it or cared. It's kind of gone into this inbox of zero. So at least if the moderator response had been, hey, that's a really good question about your dishwasher. I don't know the answer, but here's some resources, and I'm going to ask our internal expert, and someone will get back to you. At least the acknowledgement of what the question was about, showing that there's some humanity involved, would have been so important. And maybe we'll get to there with AI or something like that. But, I don't think AI will replace some of that humanity, unfortunately. But, if they had just taken like one or two support folks and just put it on the community, I think the outcome would have been a totally different experience.
Yeah, if you're going to make all that investment and then that's what you deliver, you're like, why?
Yeah, I couldn't get it. I mean, no, it was a very expensive Salesforce community. So that's why I know it was at least six figures, because it was fully customized. And obviously they invested into like keeping track of like leads and progress and things that went through and all that stuff. But the execution on it was a big fat zero.
Nice. And just kind of like, let's see, what does Juan say? Juan out of Colombia says, that's true. Moderator or host must say, I don't know that answer.
Well, I mean, it's the thing is, I think I talk about this in the book. It's about honesty. I mean, I think that there's ways that you can say you don't know the answer, but you're going to help them or find it or try to learn it. And it's also, like I said, if you go to a community that you don't know anything about, you can share about your excitement around learning. Like, hey, I didn't know how to do this, or hey guys, I just learned this, and what are your other tips that you've learned? And right, showing that excitement and learning and caring and jumping in.
Yeah, trust is like so big, because then it's like if it's a really bad domino effect. It's like it just spreads really quickly if you start to lose that type of stuff. But yeah, just amazing. Online support is like one of the biggest passions, and also what I hear, just like what are some of like the happiest, maybe not like the best, but what are like some of the happiest or like silliest or fun community stories that you've kind of like seen or been a part of that jump to mind?
I'm trying to think of B2B ones, because I mean, most of the ones that I had that were fun were B2C or C2C. But I can say I remember actually early on in Vanilla, this was actually the true. What happened is the founder of Vanilla, Marco Sullivan's laptop broke while he was building Vanilla, and the community came together and bought him a new laptop. Like, and at the time, it was a brand new MacBook Pro. They'd come together and crowdfunded the money to get him a laptop, which that fantastic, right? Like, that's community at its best. The other one I loved was I know Margot Marzur has moved on from being a community manager, but honestly, she was one of the top ones out there. Wistia, she had built a fantastic community, and the one I love the most is they did these little video clips from the community, welcoming folks to the community. So when you would join the community, you were presented with this video of fellow members welcoming you to the community with the really cool videography tricks that they had done. I always loved that. I thought that was a fantastic thing.
Which community was that?
Wistia. That community since closed, but it was the Wistia community. And then, or maybe it's now back. I know they went through they did this. They had this really great community. It was fantastic. homegrown though. Then they decided to go to Slack, so they closed it. Then I think realized, and then Margot left, and I think then they realized that Slack wasn't the spot for a customer community, because there's no benefits, for SEO and findability and all the other things. And then I think they've relaunched their community since, but they kind of lost the trust of a lot of folks when they killed it off. I mean, it used to be the go-to spot. Like if you were doing any video marketing or video learning, they have like such great resources. People would talk about how they would, how to do this or that with videos and all that jazz. So, yeah, it's unfortunate. The communities I love right now are like Qualtrics and Smartsheet, and which are customers of Higher Logic Vanilla. But I think they just, obviously I have a direct view of what kind of stuff they're building. Xometry is another one that I thought was really cool. People that are just doing a lot of great video content and also just connecting with the users in a really great way with user groups and meetups and things of this nature, and understanding that community is not about the platform. It's not just, the forums. It's about, all the other things that go around it. And I know some people use the big C or little c, and I got that out of my vocabulary because everything's community in the end. It's just the different channels that it happens on.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. And it's good to hear there's like B2C stories, because I did I think the first B2C one I did, it was great. It was for a beverage company. Get all these people together. And then it's like they come back and they're like, okay, let's kill it. Let's kill it. Right. They're like, yeah, that campaign's over with. Right. So they saw like community as a campaign, like as a marketing campaign. Once that campaign's over, let's disband everyone. I was like, oh my God, B2C is like horrible.
Yeah, I've seen that way too many times to want to talk about the graveyard of communities past,
Oh my God. And then
it's a trust issue too, right? Because some people, they'll close it down and then it's like, good luck getting them back.
Whew, never going to happen. And you also touch on one really interesting thing that's sometimes like a blind spot. My friend Hayata is one of the best in the world at SEO. It's like his favorite thing is community and SEO. So which should, you talk about it in the book, and I think that's like brilliant, because that'll hopefully like hit the box, because it's like if people can't find it, and with a lot of community, especially support, there's always like that one thread somebody like is an expert of where to find it. So the findability isn't great, right? But it's like so important to like have that kind of SEO as part of your strategy, and something that it's like top of mind that you're thinking of.
Yeah, well, I think the thing is that what I wanted people to have from the book was, I guess essentially the chapter is SEO for community managers. I didn't go into the great depth of all the things, and I've done a lot of SEO work in the past, but I just wanted to give people enough knowledge to be dangerous so that they don't get, what's the word I'm looking for, swayed necessarily by the SEO person. Because I've seen this happen way too much, where a company will hire an SEO person and the community manager just goes, well, whatever the SEO person says is the thing to do, or the boss says. And I want to give people a little bit of where they can say, well, no, that's not, hey, that's not the right way to go about it. And really the focus needs to be, what we all know, which is it just needs to be well written and easy to find, and also not taking a heavy hand to it. Because I've seen, people go a little too crazy on rewriting people's titles. And sometimes it's important to just leave it what it is, but it's also important to let people know. I love the communities that do, let's say, title modified by the moderator, or community manager, so that people at least know. But the idea is that the title should be relevant, but not. I guess what I'm trying to say is this: is like, if you see a community title that's help, that's useless. It's not of help to anyone. But then if the questions are being like, help with, they use some term, maybe it's a slang term, but it's not the preferred term by the marketing team. So the marketing team says, no, they can't use that term. Use our approved term in the title. The problem is that when people then go search using that slang term that everyone may use out there, they're not going to end up on your community. They're going to end up on Reddit or some other space that you don't necessarily want them to. You want them being on your community. So having going over marketized in the editing is actually the worst thing that you can do for yourself. And
Yeah,
so
that's
to
like
me, yeah, to me, the most interesting thing, that the report that I love to look at the most in any community, and the hot tip on SEO, is the search report, in terms of what are the terms that people are either searching and coming to your community, or on the community and searching on the community. What are the things that people are looking to find that your content is not addressing? And that may be either you have that content and you have to change the title so it's found, or you need to get that content created, or work with someone to get that content created, or find an expert in the community that can do it. But I mean, essentially, if those searches are there, it's free gold. You know, like people always say, like, how do I see the community? Like, what content should I put there? You've got it. They're telling you the content they want.
yeah, exactly. And it's like I could tell like anybody that's been in a support community is like when we first go look in it, one of the things we can say is like, especially the newer ones, there's like thousands of threads with the title help or help with this. And it's like, how do you find it? And it's like, it was really weird. It reminded me of one story when I was at Texas Instruments. We had like for some reason, inherited an other forum, which is like, we've got such a big portfolio that we can't account for it with forums and the hierarchy. So somebody's like, hey, I think my refrigerator is broken. Can somebody help me? You're all engineers here, right? Not, it's like, it doesn't conductor space. I was like, oh, then I was thinking of like Zappos and how like Tony would have his like support people if somebody was ordering needed to call them to order a pizza and nothing to do with Zappos. I was like, let me get some of like the super users and some of the people. It's like, hey, this doesn't make any sense, but if somebody knows how to help this person fix their refrigerator, so community like rallied together. It's like it made absolutely no sense. It was a little bit silly, and
It's
and then
probably
it's
your
like,
most popular, thread, right? Like, people are taking pictures, like, oh, I did this with mine. You plug this in and plug that, and try this resistor, and oh, yeah, I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it.
but then I was like, you're worried about the SEO. Other people are like, hey, you're like, hey, if I've got a refrigerator, this community is great. I'm gonna get like all these engineers that are gonna like help me out. So it's almost like SEO works maybe works against you, but it's like, yeah, it's just it's brilliant. And then two other like really quick things is like so. One is kind of like on recession talks. A lot of people just kind of just to get it out in your perspective of just kind of someone that's so beloved in the industry. But so many people are just offline through different ways, whatever they're comfortable with. They're saying, hey, Blake or Adrian, like it feels like we're in a recession, about to get one. I'm kind of new to community or I've been around for a while, but is there things I should be doing? Like, should I be like reporting metrics more? Or, like they're kind of like panicking a little bit, but what are like some of the advice or things that when people are coming to you and just kind of for either as a sanity or just kind of recommendations for just kind of weathering this kind of like potential storm?
Yeah, I'm actually working on a talk that I'll be doing in the new year, just around this topic. So I put some final touches on it. So I guess the timing of the question is really good. Um, and I actually covered it in the book too. It's actually funny. It's the one thing that I found. Like, I talk about the cargo framework, which is the 5 questions to ask to launch your community. But the bit just before it, to me, is the most important thing, and what I'm pointing people that are asking me this question, which is the MVP principle. And so the short notes for those that haven't read the book yet, the MVP principle states basically that communities are for people, and there are two groups of MVPs you need to think about. It's your external; those are the people that are going to come join the community and participate and enjoy the space. And then there's the internal ones, which are your stakeholders and the people that you need to keep happy. And essentially, the concept or the idea is that you want to have conversations before people start asking you about ROI and why do we have this community and why did this thing exist, right? Because you would rather have that conversation before it becomes a question. Now, I mean, sadly, I think at this point we're at that point where those conversations are happening, regardless if you've planned or not. And I think now is not the time. I think that there's a lot of community professionals that want to kind of push back and say you cannot get ROI and value from community for 6 to 12 months. I would say that is a very dangerous answer to give in this economic climate. As much as a lot of people will say that there is value, community has value from day one. It's all about the story and the way that you want to present it. And that gets down to talking with the stakeholders and having those conversations. I know it's scary to have that conversation and discussion, but I would say you want to over communicate. And if like you get a customer that's really excited and happy and a problem was solved, you need to share that. If if you track people by email, which I would do more voraciously now to track to see if maybe people are buying more or they're leaving a good NPS overall for the company, there are ways from day one that a community exists that you can say, hey, we're having an impact, maybe in satisfaction scores, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be economic in terms of ROI or leads. It could just be the simple fact that I'm just so happy to be able to talk with my peers around this topic or create the space and whatever that ends up being. That could be time on site, that could be number of pages per session, that could be recommendations that are happening. I kind of call it like I think I wrote a post about this kind of quote unquote dark community, right? Which it's maybe not something necessarily that people will see, but a lot of companies are doing these surveys where they'll say, where did you hear about our brand or something of this nature or purchase? And I find a lot of these surveys, and we even had this problem internally with the survey we were going to send out. I'm like, you need to add community as an option, because it's the natural thing is always to add social media. Did you hear about us on LinkedIn and Twitter and blah, blah, blah? But I'm like, what about the community? Maybe someone in the community got recommended, and that should be an option so that people then can select it. And if you put it in other, people don't think about it. But if you actually have it called out, then there's a chance that people will select it. And so then that's an opportunity to look at it. So that's where I would have that conversation up with those stakeholders and talk to them about, hey, is there ways that we can make sure that the community is known, and having that. And honestly, most of the successful communities I've seen, it's because members were craving connection. And the argument that I'm going to make about the coming recession or the recession we're in, or however you want to put it, is, you know what, when times are tough, when times are hard, when people are going through difficulty, that's the time that community is most important and the time that those things need to be built. So I actually think that there's going to be kind of a renaissance of sorts, because I know, as I was kind of thinking about it at the start of COVID, a lot of us were nervous in the community platform industry. We thought we were going to be in a lot of trouble. People were going to cancel. Our CEOs like going to batten down the hatches. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. And then all of a sudden it's like everyone needed community. And I think what ended up happening is there was some crazy enthusiasm, right? There were some companies that probably shouldn't have, but they just needed a space to connect. And I think the last little while where we've seen some people losing their jobs, which is very unfortunate, is we're just starting to see that clear out of it. But I believe that there's going to be a phoenix rising, and, hey, let's check this out, Blake, in a year from now. So in a year from now, I think we're going to be back on an upswing about talking about community. And I think now's the time for us to plan it and think about the ways that we can make it really helpful and beneficial for the organization, have those conversations, and start really thinking about impact and the way that we can, take things to the next level. And I'm hoping in a year from now, we're going to be chatting. It's like, oh my God, there's so much community stuff happening. And it's just the nature of it, cyclical. So I think that the communities that didn't make it through weren't going to make it through, even regardless. It's just everything has been sped up because of COVID and the pandemic, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and then a lot of times adversity makes you stronger. It's like it makes you kind of like dig deeper and just kind of even be more determined and laser focused. And you just find gears you didn't even know you had, like, sometimes, right? So that's
things communities don't like. That's the whole thing that I think I've mentioned in the book. But if I didn't, I mean, this is something I really believe, that spaces where communities may gather may die, but communities themselves don't die. I mean, they'll just go somewhere else. It's like water, right? It'll find a way, and people will always want to connect and find one another. And sometimes companies create spaces for that to happen, and it's like they're renting that space for those connections and things to happen. But if the company decides that they don't want to have a community and they fire their community manager, it's not like the community goes away. They're going to go somewhere else. They're going to find that conversation to be had. That's why I always find it funny when a company will say, oh, we don't want to invest in community, we're going to close it down. It's like, well, okay, I mean, they're going to go elsewhere. The only difference is now you have no control. You don't know who these people are or what they're doing. You have no data or insights. You're actually hurting your business, to be honest, which I always find funny that someone would do that. I mean, this is not the time to shut down communities. It's the time to invest in communities.
Yeah, and it's weird for me. It's like for for better or worse, just how like hardwired is like, it's like just to be like fully invested into the community is also like that on the personal level, right? So it's like every community member I meet, we are now like best friends for life, right? So even if I leave this like company, right? So it's like I was at Texas Instruments and Yakai Chen was our top user, right? And so I have left there like many moons ago, but see, he comes to CES here in Vegas every year. So it's like, hey, we're going to still like hang out, right? And so it's like for me, it's like for communities and the members, those relationships still happen. It's not like I just leave and I never talk to you again. It's like we're just constantly like connected in life. There's this kind of I don't know like what you kind of quantify, but we went through this like experience and now we're like forever bonded, right? We're always connected by that. And you see that with so many other community members. Maybe they stopped using that product, but that friendship and that connection, and then the community was that like common thread. So it's just like it's kind of it's kind of like maybe daunting for some of the new people that just like, wow, these I'm signing up for friends for life or all these strangers, but it's like for me that's how I have to be. Like we if I'm talking to you, we have to be friends for life, right? So and then just kind of like the other important point is there's a lot of people kind of today that are like, community. I think it was the Ellen Lentz with Apple in like the 1985, right? But for a lot of people that are in the last, say, 5 years or even with this year, kind of going through this imposter syndrome. And hey, it's like you don't have to just be new to the industry. This can happen with veterans, other people, and stuff like that, where you just this self doubt can kind of creep in, especially being remote, right? Because you're away from all the people and you sit in front of your freaking computer too much, not thinking about your personal health. But when people are coming to you, it's like, Adrian, I've got like kind of the self-doubt, that kind of imposter syndrome. What's kind of like some that pep talk kind of like for you when you're talking to them?
Well, I think I even opened the book talking about imposter syndrome. So I'll be the first to say it. Like I don't, I have it all the time. It's normal. It's a natural thing. But you just try stuff and you hope that it works. And if it doesn't, you just try to learn and move forward. And I mean, the best thing I can tell people is that we all feel it. Like you talk to any um, talking head in the community space, there's no one that doesn't feel imposter syndrome. It's just the nature of it that the house of cards will come down and that people are going to realize that you don't know anything of what you're talking about. But that's um, the way that you learn is just going and doing and trying. And some of the best community builders are people that you've never even heard of, that I'm friends with, that I know that are just doing the work and out there and grinding it out. And they make mistakes and they try it again, and they even talk to me sometimes and they think, oh, I have all the answers. I don't. I think that the biggest mistake you're going to have is um, thinking that you have all the answers. I mean, for me, a lot of the advice is, hey, try it and see what happens. And if it doesn't work, well, then you've learned a lesson. Just and put that mental note away, and maybe it can be useful another time. I mean, there's a lot of things I've done in my career that were complete failures. Um, and then you know what, it worked well at another community that I was working on, and sometimes it didn't work, and I had to modify it, and I learned. And the only difference for me, I guess, is that I've been able to do it at scale with hundreds of communities over the years, so I have a different viewpoint. um, but I still, to this time, I don't. Yeah, I've written a book, but I still have a lot more to learn.
Yeah, I feel like it's like I always feel like the constant student, just always learning, and every community is like so different, right? And the human factor, and
And there's things that you think are wrong that then someone proves that like, no, you're wrong.
and I also love just like sometimes like people get so afraid to fail, right? And so then you just become overly conservative, but it doesn't like move the dial. But it's like I just love some of those moments sometimes of a failure or a mistake can bring this serendipity because the community gets together and you're like, yeah, we got like a color. You could introduce a color, everybody hates it, but you use it as an opportunity. Well, what does everybody want to see? So everybody like rallies together, and at the end of that, these we get a lot of people even more invested, like in the community, right? Because we all like came together. Here's a problem. We kind of worked through it, right? And if you hadn't had that mistake or fail, you know what I mean? Like if you hadn't had that mistake or fail point, it's like, and so sometimes those are like these great opportunities. And I don't mean to like go out and fail on purpose, but it's like it's a sometimes it's a really great
Fail and iterate.
yeah, exactly. Like we're always building the plane as we're flying the plane in the community space. But as we wrap up here today, had some lightning questions, and just kind of again for anybody watching, the accidental community manager from Adrian. Also, you're doing the talk here like in January, so we'll keep a watch on that because I think that'll be great. And you're doing it at the first of the year when a lot of people do their kind of strategic planning. So I definitely am excited
Which
for
talk's
that
that?
one. I'm sorry.
Which talk is that?
You were talking about like with the recession and kind of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
future.
No, I mean, I can't say where I'm going to be giving this talk. I mean,
Yeah,
because they
yeah.
haven't announced it
Too
yet.
early. Yeah, yeah.
There will be a talk at some point in January.
Yeah, we will keep in touch with that and let everybody know and spread the word because that's like one not to be missed. So there's something with Adrian in January or first part
There's
of
a
the
lot
year.
of stuff.
Yes, you will not want to miss it, and it's great for just when you have like additional voices that kind of like be in your head at that first of the year planning. Um, and kind of like I got three lightning round questions for you. So the first one is like really simple. Just kind of curious if you have any holiday traditions or traditions in December that you love to do, or some of your favorites.
Well, so I'm of Dutch heritage, so we celebrate Santa Claus, and so it's a lot of chocolate. Everyone gets a chocolate letter with their name, and um, we celebrate a little bit earlier as well, so it makes it fun. My wife's kind of looking at me like I'm strange because she's not Dutch, right? But I try to bring those traditions into our family.
Yeah, I like those little like waffle cookie things. What are they
Uh,
called?
so there's I think it's stroopwafel.
Yeah, yes, yes. Love those things.
Yeah, I mean the speculaas as well, and some others. It just reminds me of family and traditions and things when I was growing up.
Nice. And then kind of like it's crazy. We're almost like getting to like the middle of December of the year.
Yeah.
And so just as Adrian looks back on 2022, what are some of the things that you're most thankful for?
I mean, I know it's cheesy, but I've been so thankful for this year to start to see people once again. Like um, it's been really great for the soul just to be out there and meet people and connect. And I'm really looking forward to the holiday season as well to spend time with family in person. I think even last year it was a bit touch and go. I think we're all a little bit. I mean, not that COVID's gone, but I think we're all a little bit less scared about it in a way that it's like, okay, uh, we're gonna have a get together and we're gonna see one another and have a good meal and drinks and for us, you were asking about traditions. For me, it's we have a really big party on New Year's Eve. My wife's birthday is December 30th, so her birthday is December 30th, and then we have the New Year's Eve bash, so to speak, where everyone, it's like a potluck and there's tons of food and alcohol and general fun games. We play like board games till 3 in the morning, and we've done it for many years, but because of COVID, it was canceled, and it was like one of the things that I really always cherished and always look forward to. Like there was one year I played like Gears of War for 3 days with her brother-in-law. It's just a fun. Like there's a lot of memories associated with that, so I'm kind of happy to celebrate this year. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh my god, I'm like so nostalgic to like board games. It's like you just like it's kind of weird now. It's like this almost like for me, it's like growing up, everybody had like the closet that had like all the board games in it. So I'm like, just
Well, I mean, you're talking about traditions. Another one, what we end up doing is we try to find a new board game to play on New Year's. So I'll go to like Toys R Us or Walmart and find like some weird game, and just we'll try it out on New Year's. It'll whatever that game is. So I haven't had to do that in a while, so it'll be fun to see what I'm going to pick up for this year.
nice. And what I do there is like I like it's really weird. Is like what people don't know. A lot of TV shows, like historical and movies, will have like official board games come out. And some of these are like total misfires, but it's cool just to go on like eBay and these places and like look for like the Happy Days board game or these other ones. And it's like it's so like strange because it's like what because I guess whoever they outsource it did them to, like, they don't always follow like the traditional like stuff.
You just remind me. I have one that I didn't get to use because of COVID. So it's I have a board game for Archie Comics in Riverdale. It's help Archie get through Riverdale.
Wow. Sounds amazing. And then just kind of like the last question, just kind of like for the arts kind of question. Is there any like song, music, streaming show, book, movie? Is there anything that's really exciting that as people start to get some free time as the year starts to wind down that you would recommend them to check out?
I mean, there's so much stuff that is out there. I mean, to me, I love music, but I guess my music taste might be a bit eclectic. So, I mean, there's a band from that I love that's local here, Bedouin Sound Clash, and they just put out a new album. I didn't even realize it kind of happenstance sounded, and some of the new songs are actually really good, very upbeat. I love that kind of upbeat music. Um, and then TV shows. Well, I mean, Mythic Quest. I think season two. I'm holding back all the ones that I like to binge, and so it's hard to like watch those shows where it's like, oh, you have to wait now another week. So Mythic Quest to me, I always loved because I think there's a viral meme clip, if you remember from season one, about hi, I'm the community manager, and she starts crying because she introduces herself as the community manager, and the girl goes, oh, I want to be a community manager when I grow up, and she's like, and it's like I died when I saw that. So I always find that fun. I can't wait to see what they're going to do for this season. Um, and Acapulco is also a pretty good show I've been enjoying as well. And movies, Bullet Train. If no one's seen it, I thought that was a really fantastic movie. Um, I know it's not for everyone; it's a bit violent, but it gave me a good laugh.
Nice. I think like Andor was like the only thing that I was like seeing of late that was like the storytelling was like so compelling where you just kind of get onto the it's Star Wars, you're on the edge of your seat getting invested in fake characters and stuff. You're just like it's really happening. So that was
Yeah,
cool. Like
what I liked about Bullet Train is there are just layers of story in it. I mean, Brad Pitt's in it, right? So everyone that loves Brad Pitt is there. Um, and I just it was interesting, just the layers of different characters and how it's all interconnected. And so, yes, it's violent, but there's also funny aspects to it. It's kind of like Kill Bill a bit, if you like that kind of thing, with like, I guess, a bit of speed, like the movie Speed. So it's a fun little movie if you're able to see it. I think it's on Netflix.
yeah, it just came on there.
Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, if you want some mindless stuff, it's really important. I talk about that in the book too. About disconnecting is really
Right.
important. So hopefully people were able to find stuff to disconnect and just reconnect as well, family, friends, and whatever fun stuff that they have out there.
Yeah, and I love, yeah, you have the book on personal health because we have to find the times to just uncheck to recharge because we're on so much of the time. It's like with everyone that we experience, we're like a certain level of energy. And it's kind of like you kind of hit the wall sometimes. You're like, oh, I'm a little bit too dour stuff. And community manager, you almost have to be a little bit more that almost like Mickey or Minnie Mouse type character that brings it. But it's like you got to find those times and moments to recharge. I know to take like a walk or find that time where you can think through something where you're just too like pressed on. But just
Yeah, I
having
mean,
the book on personal health was like that's like such an amazing gift that you gave people.
yeah, I think it's really important. I can't understate how important looking at health is. I mean, right now, for example, I'm watching a lot of reruns of Cheers. Um, because I find that just a mindless kind of show to watch. But I also would suggest that people, to what you were talking about, is finding stuff that isn't you plopping in front of the TV. It's to me, it's important that it's activities that are um, forcing you to think in new and creative ways, but not about work. So for me, like the big thing is stamp collecting. For me is a big one because I do it offline. There's actually a new album that came out that I just grabbed, which is all the stamps from 2022. So I always do that every year with my family, like on the holidays, because what they do is it's a multi dimensional book where they have like photos and the stories behind the stamps, and there's like a little slot that you can put the stamp in, and you kind of can review, and then we can talk about the various stamps and why they're being chosen. It's a lot of fun, and I look forward to it. And it's something that we're doing as a family, and it's not online, right? So it's I know some people laugh about my stamp collecting, but it's an important way for me to disconnect and connect with others. It's a very communal hobby, but a lot of it, the community is in person.
Yeah, it's like we get I've got this large like Logan French poster. But the interesting thing is always when I get like movie posters from France, their stamps are like so amazing. You're like, wait a minute, stamps can be like this cool, and I'll like take maybe a photo and spread them around. It's like we see a really like cool stamp. It's like yeah, I kind of like just geek out on that stuff.
Well,
Not
I
all
mean,
of them are. Yeah.
well, I think what's also interesting too, at least up here, they do these. They call them semi-postals, and what they do is they raise money for community projects. So what is happening is you spend, I think it's like a dollar more, and or like 10 cents more, or whatever, and they donate to community programs to help people. Here, I'll geek out. I'll show you one. It's
Nice.
one of the favorite ones I had. Um, so as you can see here, it's you get a $1 donation for every 10, and it goes to community projects, and they're just beautiful
Oh
stamps.
my gosh, that's amazing.
To I guess I'll zoom in. So like this can go on. When you're sending it on a Christmas card or a holiday card, you're telling people that you care, and so essentially what happens is for every purchase that happens, it goes to nonprofits for Change to Canada's Youth, and they share all the programs that get the donations in it. So it's a little. I always every year when it comes out, I always put on like my social channels, like if you have to use a stamp this year, like get their semi postals because you're doing something. And actually, this year, besides the foundation ones, they did one for the Ukraine. So if you bought a booklet, there was money donated to help people in the Ukraine. So it's a lot of important thing. And actually, that stamp came from the community. In my community, it actually started that I had. This fellow started a movement to get a stamp made for the Ukraine, and he started a petition, and it came from our community, and he got the signatures, and eventually convinced Canada Post to do the stamp, and it was really cool. It all came from this community effort, and so I mean he gets full credit for it in making that happen. But it's changing the world with stamps, and I couldn't be more happy to be part of it in a very small way.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, it's definitely,
I know it's
definitely.
not B2B. I mean, but it's like
Yep.
one of those stories that just it just shows you the power of community in that way.
Yeah, there's like a stamp isn't a stamp, and there's like some history and story when you see them. It's just like so cool, right? Not like just a thoughtless, mindless stamp, but one that has like a story to tell. And maybe even the thoughtless, mindless ones do. And it's like a piece of art. It's like really cool, like how it came to be and all that stuff. So I think these can like and how they can make a difference too, right? Not just like the functional transactional nature. That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's why I love the semi postals because there's always a story behind the ones that they chose. Like I think, I mean, I guess this turned into a stamp show a bit, but if you know, I mean, this was the one from a couple of years ago,
Wow.
which was they're glow in the dark,
Oh my goodness! Wow.
so you can put it on and. Uh, Yeah, these are ones I buy to actually use. So I know it doesn't look like I've used them yet. It's because I have other ones that are used, but they happen to be in my desk, so I pulled them out.
Wow. Yeah, it's like I get some of the international ones, and I'm just like, what in the world is this? Like out of context, I can't like figure it
I
out.
typically focus on Canadian ones,
Yep.
mostly because that's kind of where the community of people that I'm able to connect with.
Right, right, right.
I'm also a history nerd, and so makes it fun. Although I still like going to stamp shows and seeing the other stamps. It's just not what I'm collecting, but it doesn't mean that I don't appreciate it. I mean, the artistry that's involved. I mean, it really is many pieces of artwork, and that's why you'll see a lot of stamp collectors with magnifying glasses because the amount of detail that's involved is just fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. And then just kind of like wrapping it up since I feel like this is a point where our main jobs, there's people screaming for us, but just kind of in wrapping it up. So as we kind of just close out the year, how's everything been going with the book? I know you've hit like international markets, kind of like now that it's been few months. It feels like these months feel like years in these times. But kind of like, what's the reception been like? Anything that's kind of like surprised you? It's like seems like when I get on LinkedIn, there's like somebody posting about it. It's like, oh, thank you so much, Adrian.
Like I said, I wasn't the books like this aren't put out to be multi-million sellers. Like I'm not going to retire because of this book. So But the joy I've had is just, you and others that I can think of that are out there, like Carolyn Zick, uh, as an example, Jenny Weigel, Todd Nielsen, and others that have just been amazing, have gone out there and really shared this book, and just seeing so many folks finding value and leaving really great reviews on Amazon, which is so important. Like the reviews are so important just so that there's discovery of the book, but it's sold really well. Um, you know, it, I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to retire. I'm not going to be, um, I'm still in the hole on producing the book, but I wasn't done for that reason. But just the fact that it was so well received, and the fact I sold more than one copy and it didn't just go to my mother is, what makes me so happy. And the fact that I know no matter what happens in my lifetime, that I had an impact in some way in getting these words out is more than enough for me. And um, I'm hoping that anyone that needs some guidance goes out and gets the book. And um, it's just a pleasure to be here with you, and pleasure to anyone that's listening that's bought the book or thinking about it. I really appreciate it, and I also appreciate those that have bought the book to leave reviews, because it just helps more people learn about the book as well.
Nice. Was there any country or kind of individual that surprised you that got the book?
There were a lot of copies in Australia, which was cool to see. There was a couple copies in the Netherlands and Germany. So it's just interesting to see that it wasn't all just Canadians or Americans that were buying it. But I honestly, I'm not really spending that much time studying the sales charts. Like, I'll probably look at it for tax purposes when I have to, fill in all those forms that I'm going to need to fill in with the Canadian government because obviously I have to pay taxes on it. But I haven't really sat there studying how many copies they're selling. It's just I put it out there, and once I saw that it sold a couple, that made me happy. And then I got a couple of reviews on Amazon that were very nice, and I was like, okay, good, because it's nice to get some feedback that you didn't put out a piece of garbage and people are enjoying it. So I've kind of had a horse blinders on it, like just move forward, and if it sells more, that's great. But I'm not like sitting there studying the sales charts, but very thankful for everyone that sold.
A worldwide book that helps out, because the profession is, there's universal, right? So it's like different markets and industries. It's not just a U.S. phenomenon, Canadian. We've got professionals all over the world, and so this is like the gift that keeps on giving. So I think
I know people are asking about an audiobook. I can tell you definitively that I will not be recording one. I don't have the time. And I also, it's not so much time. I'm not keen on doing it. I mean, the book's there. I mean, hopefully that's enough. And I do a lot of these podcasts and talks. I give the essences of what's in the book. So hopefully it's enough that people are interested to read it. And I promise you, it's a fun read. Like, if you're in community or doing community work, I promise you this isn't a boring textbook.
yes, I can't, like, the audio is too distracting for me. So I'm like old fashioned. I need like the print book that I can read. And I think if I was like an author, the thing that would drive me crazy, like on Amazon, or like the reviews were like, the shipping sucked, the packaging sucked. It's like, this has nothing to do with the product.
It happens, yeah. I mean, the main test for me, and I joked about it on social when it happened. My wife, when we got the first copy, took out a highlighter, and she's like, "It has to pass the highlighter test." I'm like, "What's that?" And she was like, highlighting on both sides. She's like, "It's good. You can sell this."
Yeah, that's like Jamie Johnson, who's over at Spotify. Like, when you look at his community books, like he's got like the highlighters, he's got the little like labels and
Yeah,
stuff for
I
like.
know. I was on a show, and he went thoroughly through the book, and we met just recently because he was like, after I did the CMX book review, he's like, I need another hour with you to go through all the things in the book. And he's like, and he's like going through, and he's like, this chapter and that bit. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, it makes me happy that people, like, I honestly, I like I said, I wrote it for myself to be the book that I would have hoped that was there. And I didn't really worry too much about the audience, but by focusing on what I knew I needed, I know that the book delivered. And like, if and I think it's funny too. It's like, if I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but you know, like when you worked on something for a long time and you become an expert, but then you stop doing it, you lose all that knowledge, or over time you kind of forget it. What think I love about this book is I, at the peak of my career, in many senses, I wrote this book. And so now if I start to forget stuff, or, you know, because memories get stale as you get older, I have this book to go back and read what I thought on a particular topic, or, um, you know, what the considerations are. So that, and because I focused on writing it for me in many ways, and me, and as an archetype of anyone that's brand new to community building, that's lost and needs some guidance, I think it'll come out helpful. And like you know, I think you and others have told me it's been a very helpful book. So I'm
Yeah,
very
you can. Yeah, you can read it kind of linear, but then a lot of times with these, it's like this the reference referenceability of just like if you're going through something, or what did Adrian say? So it's that other voice. You don't have Ask Siri for community managers, but it's like Ask Adrian. You can go to the book. Well, what does he say, or what is his kind of like thought process? Just kind of like getting, you want that other like vantage point or some perspective. It's like so great to just kind of, because it's never, I never want to be at the point where you think you've got it all like figured out. So it's just great to like, it is that gift that keeps on giving. So even if I, something like a super user program, right, read all the stuff with vanilla Jake McGee, but then it's like with the book, like going through like there's so many different facets and aspects to it. It's like, what do they think about this, that, the other? And it's like all the real world stuff, is like captured in there. And so that's where it's kind of like at these different stages of the book where yeah, that's like the real world stuff. So as I'm having to encounter it in life, almost like when you're going to a location, Google Maps says it's like based on the drive, it's like 20 minutes. And so when you look at your stuff, like based on what you're doing, oh no, or like you're on the right path. So it's good when you have like books like that are like steeped in that real world, that essence, like a really beautiful documentary film where it's like kind of historical in a way, but this is kind of like capturing the craft in all its glory and ways to do things. And so that's where it's like this universal, the gift that keeps on giving. And it's great when books like that come along, right? So it's like everybody should just have it there. You're going to reference it. You're going to need it, things like that. But it's really great that anyone's like taking the time to give back to the profession in that way. And I think that speaks to your heart and vision for kind of going above and beyond just as a profession to, hey, how can I like help other people? How can I help the profession? And 10, 20 years, there's still going to be people like reading this book and impacting like other people. So it's just a beautiful thing.
That's very kind of you. Thank you so much.
And other than that, just we can wrap up. We're like 30 minutes over, so now we're like the 90-minute show. But just everybody out there, happy holidays. Thanks for being in this great profession. If the doubt starts creeping in, you've got books like this. You can always like reach out to other people. So if there's just don't let yourself slip into despair or other types of things. Or if you have questions, there's so many people like Adrian, there's Lori, Juan, and other people. Just feel free to reach out to people. Whatever it needs to do. It's like we're a great community of community professionals that are there to help. And thanks, Hillary Snow, for staying in the whole time. But Merry Christmas to you too. And so, any final thoughts from you, Adrian? Just kind of like closing out for this year, or that you want to tell people?
I will end with, you know, the best piece of advice that I have in the book, and we touched on it, about taking care of yourself. Um, so I would just say, if you want to have healthy, great communities, it starts with you taking good care of yourself, and putting yourself first is a really important thing. And I hope that everyone takes at least a couple of days to reconnect with family and friends and loved ones, and just has a chance to get a fresh perspective and get ready for 2023. It's so important. So please find a way to just disconnect. I don't care if you have to, you know, change your password on your community so you can't get in, or something. I don't know, whatever it is that you need to do. Just unplug yourself and give yourself the time to recharge and refresh. You'll be very thankful for it. And as I say, you know, none of the work that we do is life threatening or shouldn't be. We're not surgeons. So, you can take a day off, and it's really important, especially at this time of year. Um, hug your loved ones and spend the time, with your friends, and reconnect. You'll be a better community manager for it, because if you're on the go all the time, waking up at 3 a.m, checking your community, and you don't give yourself the time to recharge and refresh, you're doing harm to yourself and your loved ones, because you're not there for them, and your community, because you're not your best self.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Adrian. We had Adrian Speyer on today. Vanilla, higher logic, vanilla, higher logic, higher logic, vanilla, 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 higher logic, higher logic.
Higher Logic Vanilla at
Yeah.
higherlogic.com. And you can visit the website, adrianspeyer.com, has the book, the newsletter, and all the fun stuff as well.
Yeah, it's all the great stuff. We'll be posting that out. So, wow, it's so weird to be saying happy holidays and goodbye 2022, but
It's a
that's
wrap.
where we are. Yeah, that's where we are. It is a wrap, and you know, thanks for having such a great book to carry us through 2022. And everybody have a great time off, and
Thank
everybody
you, Blake.
stay in touch and all that great stuff.
Thank you so much, Blake. I really appreciate being here, and thank you for having me on your platform.